Usually when we talk about like a map or a GPS, there's this expectation of just absolute precision.
Right.
You punch in an address, you see the solid blue line, and the voice tells you exactly where to turn. But then you step out of the car and you start looking at the landscape of your own life.
Yeah, which is completely different.
Exactly. You look at your time, your stress, your definitions of success, and suddenly that GPS is just spinning in circles.
Rerouting. Always rerouting.
Right. We are navigating a reality that is, well, to put it mildly, murky. And that brings us directly to the mission for today's deep dive.
I'm very excited for this one.
Me too. We are opening up a radical, cohesive framework for, completely redefining happiness and surviving the modern hustle. We're looking at a collection of 40 profound reflections, and the source material is originally titled, Because Life is Vaster Than the Sky.
It's such a striking title. And, it's the absolute definition of existential muddy waters out there. We really think we have a precise map for how life is supposed to work.
We're told we do, right from childhood.
Exactly. But if you look closely at society's default definitions of success, of property, and even of age, we're mostly just following ghosts. What we're exploring today challenges the very foundation of what we are told matters.
It really does.
The analytical angle of this text, it seamlessly blends this deeply grounded mindfulness with a remarkably, honestly rebellious attitude.
It's very punk rock in a weird way.
It is. And our goal is to connect the dots across this entire framework. We want to show the underlying mechanisms of these ideas, like why they work and how adopting even a few of these 40 mindsets could drastically alter your daily reality.
So just think about this as we get into it, if you're listening right now. How much of your day is spent actively stressing over things that, according to the rules we are about to explore, do not actually exist?
That's the core question, yeah.
Let's start right there with the concept of what is real. Because this framework takes an absolute sledgehammer to how we perceive time and happiness. It argues that happiness is not some peak euphoric experience.
Right, like winning the lottery.
Yeah, or riding a roller coaster. It defines it simply as peace. It is the state of waking up and being completely free from anxiety.
And the text makes a very sharp, necessary distinction here between internal and external happiness. We spend our lives chasing external happiness. The comfort of a nice house, a good meal, financial security.
The stuff we're supposed to want.
Exactly. But the text argues that external happiness is purely for survival. It's just the biological and logistical maintenance required to keep your body functioning.
Wow. Just maintenance.
Yeah. True happiness, on the other hand, relies entirely on mental training. It explicitly states that true happiness cannot be tied to objects or to other people.
Which is wild because society tells us the exact opposite.
Oh, 100%.
The entire machinery of modern advertising relies on the message. Find the right partner, buy the right car, get the right house, and then you will be happy. But if your happiness is tied to a car and the car gets totaled,
your happiness is totaled.
Let's
look at the mechanics of why tying your happiness to external factors is just a guaranteed losing game. Objects degrade, economies experience downturns, people change, they leave, or, they inevitably pass away.
Right, it's all impermanent.
If your core state of peace is tethered to something outside of your own nervous system, you are constantly at the mercy of a world you cannot control. It's a state of perpetual vulnerability.
That sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. The source's assertion is that true happiness requires a well-trained mind, because your mind is the only territory you actually have jurisdiction over. If you don't train it, you're just reacting to external stimuli all day long.
And it links this mental training directly to our perception of time, which I found fascinating.
Yes, the time aspect is huge.
The framework insists there is no past and there is no future. There's only the present moment. And it uses this incredibly striking phrase to describe what we do with our time. It says we must stop burning the present time with the shadows of the past and future.
That phrase is brilliant. A shadow has shape, it has form, it can even look terrifying.
Sure.
But physically, it has zero substance. It has no mass. It cannot actually hurt you. Think about the psychological mechanism of rumination.
Oh, I'm very familiar.
Right. When you sit in your living room agonizing over something embarrassing you said 5 years ago, or spiraling into panic about a meeting you have next week, your brain is firing stress hormones.
Cortisol, adrenaline, all of it.
Exactly, as if the threat is in the room with you right then. You are taking the actual finite burning energy of your present moment and using it to fuel a shadow.
You're letting a completely fabricated mental projection consume your physical reality.
And the physiological toll of that is massive. You're literally wearing your body down over an event that is either long gone or hasn't even happened.
It's crazy when you frame it like that. And it takes this laser focus on the present and applies it to our relationships too. This is point 5 in the text. It argues that the person standing right in front of you is the most important person.
The only real person, actually.
Yeah. In fact, they are the only real person in the world at that exact moment.
Consider how radical that is in our current attention economy. How often are we sitting across from someone at a cafe, but our minds are in our phones?
Way too often.
We're worrying about an email from a boss who isn't there, or scrolling through photos of people we haven't spoken to in a decade. We're interacting with digital shadows.
Yeah, that hits hard.
The text is demanding that we snap back to the physical reality. The biological human being in your immediate presence is the only reality you can legitimately interact with in that second. If you aren't fully there with them, you aren't really anywhere.
Okay, I hear the philosophy of this, but we have to look at the practical application.
Of course.
It is really easy for a philosophical text to say, only the present exists, ignore the shadows of tomorrow. But how do we actually do that when the mortgage company doesn't care that tomorrow is an illusion?
Right, the bank wants its money.
The bill is coming due, and it feels very real. It's not a shadow to me when I have to pay it.
But the anxiety about the bill is real, while the event of paying it tomorrow is still a projection. The text actually anticipates this friction. It doesn't tell you to abandon your responsibilities.
So no running away to the woods?
No running away to a mountain monastery to find the present moment. It tells you to anchor yourself through the absolute simplest, most mundane physical actions.
Like what?
It suggests finding grounding in things like walking in your backyard, feeding stray birds, or, and this is point 16, finding joy in sweeping, wiping, and organizing your house.
Sweeping the floor is the pinnacle of mental training.
Exactly.
That completely strips away the need for, specialized meditation retreats or luxury vacations to find peace.
It totally democratizes mindfulness. The text explicitly says, do not seek happiness from special activities. You make small, mundane things special through your attention. Let's look at the psychology of flow states. When you're sweeping the floor and you're entirely focused on the mechanics of the broom, the friction of the bristles, the accumulation of the dust, you are completely anchored in physical reality.
You're just in it.
Right. Your brain cannot simultaneously process the sensory input of that exact moment and panic about tomorrow's electric bill. The sheer deliberate focus required to do a simple task perfectly acts as a circuit breaker for anxiety.
So that is how you stop burning the present with shadows. You literally pull your attention back to the physical sensation in your hands.
Yes. You don't escape your life. You finally show up for the microscopic details of it.
Wow. But, if true happiness is found in the focus of sweeping a floor, and if we are supposed to ignore the shadows of tomorrow's anxieties, then this entire structure we've built around success and climbing the corporate ladder, it's fundamentally incompatible with this philosophy.
It is entirely incompatible. The text moves seamlessly from this personal mindfulness into an outright rebellion against society's concepts of success, wealth, and property.
And rebellion, I love that.
It really is. It states that work is not a tool for making money. Instead, work is a tool to polish away your own defilements and to serve humanity.
Okay, we need to define defilements here because that sounds like heavy religious jargon. In this context, what are we talking about?
It translates roughly to the mental dirt or friction that clouds our judgment. Things like unchecked greed, rampant ego, deep-seated anger, or ignorance.
So basically human nature.
Right. Think of your mind like a lens. Over time, society, trauma, and ego smear dirt on that lens. The text is arguing that the primary purpose of your daily work, your job, is not to hoard capital. Your job is the grinding stone you use to smooth out your own ego.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So when you face a difficult client or a frustrating project, you use that friction to practice patience, to curb your anger, to serve someone else. The paycheck is just a byproduct that allows you to survive while you do this internal polishing.
That completely flips the capital script.
Completely.
We're taught from birth that work is a pure transaction, You give your time, you get currency, and that currency buys you status and comfort.
Yeah.
But this framework argues that money, power, and fame are actually sharp tools. They are dangerous.
They must be handled with extreme, deliberate care. If you don't understand the nature of a shark tool, it will eventually maim you.
I keep picturing like a professional chef's knife.
That's a perfect analogy.
It is an incredibly useful tool if you need to chop vegetables to feed your family. You use it precisely for what it is designed for. But if you get greedy or careless and grab it by the blade, you bleed.
Exactly.
The text explicitly says to use money only as necessary, to use little so that you can actually be the master of your own life.
Right, because if you don't master those tools, if you chase wealth and praise for their own sake, you are locking yourself in what the author calls a dark prison.
A dark prison.
Yeah. The text tells the reader to think like a rebel, to be brave, and to break out of that prison. Let's look at the cultural archetype of the incredibly wealthy executive.
The CEO on a yacht.
Right. The person obsessed with status, constantly paranoid about losing their market position, surrounded by people they cannot genuinely trust. Society calls that person a master of the universe.
The pinnacle of success.
But this text looks at that exact same person with all their yachts and properties and says, what a tragedy. That person is a lonely prisoner in a dark cell. They are trapped by the very things they thought would liberate them.
It's a total reevaluation of status.
Yeah.
And it extends this to the physical things we own, too. The instruction is brutally clear. Stop accumulating things.
Just stop.
Yeah, it argues that accumulation causes attachment, and attachment is the root of suffering. It advises us to keep memories, but to throw away clutter to make our lives sharp and fast.
Sharp and fast. The cognitive load of ownership is staggering when you actually break it down.
I mean,
Well, every single item you own is something you have to insure, maintain, protect, clean, worry about, and eventually dispose of or lose.
that's so true. I spent half my weekend just managing my stuff.
Exactly. The energy required to manage an excess of physical objects drains your mental bandwidth. Getting rid of clutter isn't just about having a tidy house for aesthetic reasons. It reduces the background noise of your life.
So a sharp and fast life means
It means your decision-making isn't bogged down by the maintenance of 1,000 unnecessary objects.
take a second and look around the room you're sitting in right now, listener. How much of what you see is clutter that is mentally or physically slowing down your life? How much of your energy is tied up in storing or protecting things you haven't touched in a year?
A lot of it, probably.
Imagine how much sharper your focus would be if you only collected memories instead of objects.
And the text pushes this idea of ownership even further into deeply provocative territory. It talks about going beyond what is merely legal, stating that laws are not higher than compassion.
That part really stopped me in my tracks.
It's heavy.
Just because a business practice or a real estate transaction is legal doesn't mean it doesn't destroy your fellow human beings. And that it applies this to the earth itself. It says the resources you own, like your land, the trees in your front yard, don't actually belong to you. They belong to the world.
This forces a major confrontation between legality and ethics, between ownership and stewardship. Legal ownership is a recent human construct.
It's just a piece of paper.
Right, filed in some municipal building. But from a cosmic geological perspective, the idea that a human being with an 80-year lifespan can own a piece of the earth is absurd.
It is a little arrogant.
You don't own the oxygen that tree produces. You didn't invent the sunlight it drinks. You didn't synthesize the soil it grows in. You are simply a temporary steward of that geographic coordinate.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
The framework implores you to recognize that these resources fundamentally belong to the ecosystem, and you must ethically return them to the world by sharing their benefits, by not hoarding the land, and by recognizing your profound insignificance in the timeline of that environment.
So we strip away the material obsession. We stop hoarding objects.
Yeah.
We view wealth as a highly dangerous tool, and we realize we are just temporary guests on our own front lawn.
Right.
If you actually manage to do that, you suddenly have a massive surplus of time and emotional energy. Energy that is no longer tied up in defending your ego or your property.
And where does that energy go?
It naturally redirects toward the people around us.
But human connection is messy.
Very.
Once you turn your attention to other people, how do you interact with them without creating new attachments and new suffering? The text provides a very strict set of mechanics for human connection, focusing heavily on how we speak.
The rules for speech are intense. Point 6 and 7, I think. Do not say things that destroy people's spirits. Do not lie. Do not gossip behind people's backs.
Speech is the primary mechanism through which our internal mind manifests in the external world. When you gossip or when you tear someone down with a cynical comment, you might rationalize it as just venting.
I'm just blowing off steam.
Exactly, or exchanging information. But the text argues you are actively polluting the shared psychological environment. You are taking your internal defilements, your jealousy, your anger, and aerosolizing them into the room.
Aerosolizing your anger. I'm going to borrow that phrase.
Please do. But there's a fascinating secondary rule here about the volume of our speech.
Yes. It says that when you speak less, your thoughts actually become sharper. It treats words as more valuable than gems, suggesting we should use them highly economically.
Think about the cognitive filtering process required to speak less. If you treat your words as a finite, precious resource, you are forced to evaluate every thought before it leaves your mouth.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Imagine you wake up every day and you only have an allowance of exactly 100 words.
Oh, that's a tight budget.
Right. If you only have 100 words to get you through until midnight, you are absolutely not going to waste 40 of them gossiping about a coworker's outfit.
Definitely not.
You are going to curate them. You will only say things that are undeniably true, strictly necessary, and fundamentally kind. The reason your thoughts become sharper is because you are forcing your brain's executive function to constantly filter out the noise in the ego.
Treating your words as more valuable than gems shifts the entire nature of your relationships. You stop filling dead air with nervous chatter.
You just let silence exist.
Yes. And this discipline of restraint extends to how the Tang defines love. Point 14, I believe. It states that love is the greatest religion, the central force holding the world together, but its definition of romantic love is entirely devoid of the possessiveness we usually associate with it.
It notes that while finding a romantic partner might be easy, finding a true soulmate or a partner in merit is incredibly rare.
Very rare.
And the advice it gives is the antithesis of a modern romantic comedy. It instructs, do not try to possess your partner. Do not dictate their thoughts or try to mold them to think exactly like you. Give them absolute freedom, sacrifice for them, and share with them.
We constantly conflate love with attachment. The cultural narrative is, I love you, therefore you belong to me, therefore it is your responsibility to make me happy.
Which is so toxic when you say it out loud.
It is. And the text completely severs that conditional link. Love, in this framework, is fundamentally about non-possession. Your partner has their own sovereign mind, their own defilements to polish, their own spirit.
You don't own them.
No. Your job is not to manage them. Your job is to be a true friend, offering kindness and respect without demanding conformity. It points out that true power in a relationship, or in life generally, isn't about ambition, leverage, or control.
So what is true power?
True power is the capacity for sustained focus, unconditional love, and patience directed at whatever is right in front of you.
So we have this intense micro-level focus. Tightly control your words, release your need to possess your partner, practice radical patience. But then the source material does this incredible conceptual zoom out.
The macro view.
Right. It connects these tiny, isolated personal actions directly to the existence of global conflicts. It argues that war is not some distant, abstract political event happening on a map. Our own personal anger, our daily hatred, our mundane greed, these are the actual core ingredients of war.
This is perhaps the most profound synthesis in the entire collection. We tend to view global war as a systemic failure created by politicians, diplomats, or generals.
People in boardrooms.
Right. But the text argues that a war is nothing more than the accumulated, localized manifestation of millions of people's unaddressed greed, anger, and delusion.
Wow.
When you succumb to explosive road rage, or when you hold on to bitter, vindictive hatred for a neighbor over a property line, you are manufacturing the exact same raw emotional material that fuels a bombing campaign. The scale is different, but the chemical and spiritual substance is identical.
That is a staggering weight to put on the individual. If my road rage is the exact same substance as a mortar shell, then I am entirely complicit in the state of the world.
It is a heavy realization, but it is also empowering because it provides the only viable solution. It says that to change the world without leaving toxic residue, there is only one effective path.
Which is?
You must simply cleanse your own mind.
The concept of toxic residue is fascinating. I interpret that as what happens when people try to fight for a genuinely good cause, but they do it fueled by hatred and anger.
Yes, exactly.
They might win the political battle or pass the legislation, but they leave behind so much resentment, so much vitriol, that they just plant the seeds for the next inevitable conflict.
You cannot build a peaceful architecture using the tools of anger. It's structurally impossible. The text promises that by ruthlessly suppressing your own internal defilements, by ensuring your localized anger doesn't leak out into your words or your actions, you are literally by default saving the world.
Just by being peaceful.
You are actively removing one source of hatred from the global ecosystem. You are breaking the chain of transmission.
Okay, so managing our words like gems, letting go of the desperate need to control our partners, constantly acting as a circuit breaker for our own anger. I mean, this is a massive, lifelong undertaking.
It's not a weekend seminar, that's for sure.
I know. Which brings up the question of how this framework views the long arc of a human life. How do we sustain this level of discipline over decades without burning out?
That requires an understanding of how the text views the art of living, the balance of time, and the illusion of age.
Let's look at the concept of balance first. It addresses this idea of having valuable time. In our current culture, valuable time means you are maximizing your output, constantly grinding, side hustling, being endlessly productive.
Hustle culture.
Yeah, exactly. But the text redefines valuable time as balancing all dimensions of your life simultaneously.
The modern myth of the 100-hour workweek is that it produces ultimate value. This text argues that such a life is completely hollow. It provides a very specific, uncompromising checklist for balance.
What's on the list?
It says you must have time dedicated to exercise, time for seeking knowledge, time for work, time for family, time for yourself, and crucially, time for total stillness and relaxation.
Stillness.
Yes. If you are missing any single one of these dimensions, your time is not actually valuable no matter what your tax bracket is. You are structurally out of balance and headed for collapse.
It's a holistic view of a single day, but it maps this holistic view onto the trajectory of a lifetime, too. It breaks human life down into distinct stages, assigning a specific vital role to each.
Right, starting with childhood.
Yes, for childhood, the instruction is singular. Fun. Society has a mandate to prioritize and protect the unburdened joy of children.
But the advice it gives for youth is where it sharply diverges from modern expectations. It says youth is the designated time for experimentation and, most importantly, failure. It actually issues a direct warning. Don't succeed too early.
Don't succeed too early.
Yeah.
In a culture obsessed with lists celebrating 30 under 30 or teenage tech billionaires, this text is arguing that early outsized success is a dangerous trap.
It really is.
If you hit the jackpot at 22, you entirely miss the curriculum of failure. You never build the resilience, the deep empathy, or the profound humility that only comes from trying something, failing catastrophically, and having to painstakingly figure out how to rebuild yourself.
Exactly. You construct a massive house without pouring a foundation first.
And it collapses eventually.
Always. Failure in youth is not a delay of success. It is an essential structural component of a durable life. As we transition into adulthood, the role shifts entirely. The text dictates that as an adult, thinking primarily of yourself becomes shameful. An adult is meant to be a bridge.
Think about the physics of a bridge. A bridge stands immovably strong. It bears a massive, punishing amount of weight, and it exists solely to allow others to cross over it to get to where they need to go.
Right.
The text is saying that adulthood is the phase where you become the infrastructure that allows the youth to build their own wisdom. You stop obsessing over building monuments to your own ego, and you become the pavement for the next generation.
And then it transitions to old age. The mandate for the elder is to aggressively learn to let go of everything. Their final role is to become a beautiful flower, offering smiles, warmth, and encouragement to everyone equally without discrimination or judgment.
The bridge to the flower.
Yes. It's a profound arc. From the necessary, chaotic experimentation of youth, to the sturdy, selfless utility of the adult bridge, to the pure, unattached joy of the elderflower. It demands that as we age, our focus must consistently shift outward, away from the self.
But just as it perfectly lays out these beautiful sequential life stages, the text completely pulls the rug out from under us.
It sure does.
It declares that age itself is actually a fictional illusion.
It forces you to realize that the timeline you're clinging to is entirely subjective.
It points out the relativity of the aging process. A 4-year-old looks at a 40-year-old and calls them an uncle, an elder, someone who is old. But an 80-year-old looks at that exact same 40-year-old and sees a child, a kid who hasn't even figured out how the world works yet. Young and old are completely fabricated constructs that change entirely depending on the vantage point of the observer.
Think about how many artificial limitations we place on ourselves based on these fabricated constructs. How often do people say, I'm too old to go back to school, or I'm past my prime, I can't change careers now?
All the time. Think about something you've actively talked yourself out of doing recently because you felt you were too late to the game. This framework is explicitly reminding you that to an 80-year-old, you are essentially a toddler.
You have an ocean of time.
You really do. The timeline imposing anxiety on you is a hallucination.
And because the timeline is an illusion, the text urges us to find our true grounding not in our chronological age or our societal status, but in the natural world. It states that nature, the sky, the clouds, the water, is your only true friend.
Your only true friend.
Proximity to the vastness of nature recalibrates the mind, which allows you to see through these petty human illusions.
It argues that while art and poetry can soften a rigid mind, true poetry isn't written in a book. True poetry is the actual physical sights and sounds of life. It says a tiny, solitary blade of grass is nature's greatest masterpiece.
A blade of grass.
If your mind is trained enough to see the sheer, impossible masterpiece of biology in a blade of grass, you are no longer capable of stressing over whether society thinks your resume is impressive enough.
You've fundamentally shifted your entire value system from arbitrary human metrics to undeniable universal realities.
Once you accept that age is an illusion, that modern success is a trap, that you are merely a temporary bridge for the next generation, you start to suspect that maybe almost everything we agonizingly stress about is a bit of an illusion.
Which is terrifying, but also freeing.
And that suspicion sets us up perfectly for the final, most challenging aspect of this source material.
The transition into ultimate detachment and viewing life through an entirely different, almost theatrical lens.
We are getting into the deepest philosophical waters here. So what does this all mean? The text lays down some brutally honest truths about human cognition. It says we all operate with two competing inner voices, the voice of wisdom and the voice of defilement.
Which we defined earlier as ego, greed, and fear.
Right. The daily work is constantly monitoring which one is currently running the soundboard in your head, because the overarching truth is we actually know very little.
The call for radical humility here is intense. It states that the things we know are tiny. The things we know that we don't know are immense. But the things we don't even know that we don't know, those are infinite.
Infinite ignorance.
Yeah, and to deal with that infinite ignorance, it introduces this concept of Dhamma. It defines Dhamma simply as the way it is.
Let's unpack Dhamma, because it's a foundational concept in Eastern philosophy. It often refers to cosmic law or the fundamental nature of reality. In the context of this text, it is the ultimate acceptance of impermanence and uncontrollable fluctuation. Today you are incredibly glad. Tomorrow you are devastatingly sad. That is not a malfunction of your life. That's just the way it is. It is the weather of existence.
But then it hits us with a massive contradiction to everything modern society teaches us about personal growth. We are constantly told, get out there, get experience. Experience is the best teacher. Build your resume of life.
Right? Experience is supposed to be the ultimate goal.
But the text argues that experience is actually the root cause of our fear and worry.
Wait, how can experience be the enemy?
Let's look at the psychological mechanics of fear and the predictive nature of the human brain. If you have never been bitten by a dog, you have no inherent fear of dogs. A dog is just a phenomenon in the present moment.
Sure.
The experience of the bite creates the trauma, and from that point on, your brain uses that experience to predict future pain. The text is arguing that as we accumulate complex human experiences, heartbreaks, professional failures, betrayals, embarrassments, we start aggressively projecting those past hurts onto every fresh new situation.
So we're just reacting to our past over and over.
Yes. We literally stop seeing the present moment clearly because we are viewing it entirely through the dirty, distorted lens of our past traumas. The text instructs us to consciously step past our experience, to force ourselves to approach every single moment with the freshness of a beginner, utterly untethered to the baggage of the past.
It's asking us to intentionally drop our armor.
Which is terrifying.
It is, and it pushes this surrender even further. It says you will never understand life before you die. Never. The puzzle will not be solved. But it says that accepting that you will never understand it is actually a beautiful, liberating thing.
This is the ultimate thesis of the entire collection, the profound liberation of accepting your own ignorance. Think about how much energy we spend trying to figure it all out, trying to crack the code of our relationships, trying to control all the variables so we can finally feel secure.
It's basically a full-time job.
The text says life is inherently fundamentally incomprehensible to the human mind. By admitting you will never figure it out, you immediately drop the massive, exhausting burden of trying to act as the general manager of the universe.
General manager of the universe. I like that.
You surrender control. And in that complete surrender, you find absolute peace. You become a person without endless, frantic demands.
But how does a person without demands actually live in the modern world?
Carefully.
The final instructions are incredibly specific. It says you must consciously create space between yourself and the chaotic events of the world. Do not let yourself drown in the emotional undertow. And it uses this amazing, relatable modern metaphor. It suggests you should view the world and your own life as a long-running television soap opera. You should watch it with a sense of entertainment.
We need to carefully distinguish detachment from dissociation here, though. Watching your life like a soap opera doesn't mean you become an unfeeling sociopath who abandons their family or ignores human suffering.
Right, you still have to care.
It means you recognize the inherent drama of existence for what it is, temporary scenes. You play your assigned part as necessary, you show up to work, you care deeply for your children, you pay your bills, but internally, you take a step back.
You get some distance.
You take a seat in the audience of your own life. When a crisis hits, instead of being the actor completely swept up and destroyed by the tragedy of the scene, you observe the plot twist.
Try applying this right now, listener, to whatever is causing a knot in your stomach today. Maybe it's vicious office politics. Maybe it's a tense standoff with a family member. What if you mentally stepped back and viewed that exact situation as just the latest ridiculous plot twist in season 5 of your soap opera?
Right.
Like, oh, look what the writers did to my character this week. They threw in a passive-aggressive email from Dave in accounting. Let's see how the protagonist handles it.
That's perfect.
How much lighter does that instantly feel? It immediately extracts the paralyzing sting from the event.
It works because you remember that the immediate drama isn't the ultimate defining reality. The text starkly reminds us that death is always near. In fact, it argues we are constantly dying and being reborn in every single moment as our thoughts, cells, and emotions constantly regenerate and change.
Everything is in flux.
Yes. It asserts that fundamentally, nothing belongs to you. Not your property, not your titles, not your physical body, not even the thoughts passing through your head. Because nothing belongs to you, you should live like a wanderer. Not gripping desperately to the scenery, but moving through the world lightly, observing, experiencing, and letting go.
We have covered a truly massive psychological and philosophical journey today.
We really have.
From the very beginning, redefining the peak of human happiness as simply sweeping a floor with an uncluttered mind, to actively rebelling against the dark, isolating prison of wealth and material accumulation, to realizing the terrifying truth that our own mundane personal anger is the exact fuel that creates global warfare.
It's a lot to take in.
We've explored the necessity of early failure, learned to view the timeline of age as a complete hallucination, and finally discovered how to sit back in the audience and watch the heavy, crushing drama of our own lives like it's just a Tuesday night television show.
It is a total, uncompromising teardown and rebuild of how to exist as a conscious creature in the modern world. And after all of these challenging rules, after dismantling our egos and our property, the author leaves us with one final, incredibly gentle wish in the source text.
What's the wish?
The author says, "May your coming to this world be a wonderful vacation." Life, despite all its apparent trials, its friction, and its pain, should ultimately be relaxed. It shouldn't be a state of chronic tension. It is purely, simply an opportunity for your consciousness to learn.
A wonderful vacation. That brings us to one last provocative thought, directly inspired by the final reflections of our source material. The text suggests that the nature of life is so unexpected, so fluid, and so profoundly strange that we might actually just be dreaming that we are living right now.
A dream within a dream.
Exactly. If this entire existence, with all its heavy, crushing responsibilities, its urgent deadlines, its heartbreaks, and those supposedly critical GPS maps we're all so desperately trying to follow, if all of it is ultimately just a fleeting dream, a temporary, wildly vivid vacation for your soul to learn something new, what are you going to do with the rest of your day today?
It completely changes the weight of the next decision you make.
It really does. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Drop the map, ignore the shadows, and try to actually enjoy the landscape of the vacation. We will see you next time.